Hey friends out there in YouTube land, it's time for another question and answer with me, of course, Robert Hamm. That's what I'm here and doing. And today actually comes from another person I've been carrying on a conversation with over on Instagram. So guys, if you don't follow over on Instagram, you are only getting half the story. That's very important. If you're following me here, then that's great. But if you want to see and communicate with me directly and what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, you got to do that over on Instagram, and I'll be answering your questions just like this guy's. This is Dabadoo. Yes, I know your name's David, but I like calling you Dabadoo. And he wants to know about Flash. Basically, he's got a TL70. This is a TL70 video, but it applies to all different types of cameras. And he wants to know about how he can use Flash more effectively. And he tells me, he says, Rob, when I'm using Flash, I get washed out faces all the time. And trust me, I've been there. So before we dive right into it, let's actually take a little walk over here to the camera shelf and see what kind of camera's out there and see if we can play that game, which of these things are not like the other, because your camera is very important into whether or not you can use different kinds of flash. Okay, friends, I'm back, and we've walked over here to the cameras, and we're going to play that little game, which of these cameras is not like the other. And I want you to look, and I want you to kind of think. We've got a Canon, some Pentax, we've got a Yashica mat, we've got a Ricoh, we've got another can right there, we've got a Minolta, we've got a couple of Olympus down here. These, of course, are rangefinders. This is a rangefinder. These two are rangefinders. The rest of them are not. Then we've got some digital and some instant cameras down. Oh, yeah, we got a cool Rolleiflex. I'm still working on fixing this one. And some amazing instant cameras, with my favorite being the TL70. You know that. And then some great digital cameras by Fujifilm right here, the X Pro 1, the X100S, and the XT1. Guys, this is the kit I show up to and photograph your wedding with. And I love it. I'm proud of it. I don't show up with the whole thing, obviously, and the majority of the work is done here. But cool wedding photos with the Instax cameras like that. How awesome. So while I've been talking, you've had the opportunity to start thinking about what makes these cameras different. And we're talking about flash. So let's think about what is important with flash. First of all, what does flash do? Well, if you want to say that flash adds light to the scene, that's not exactly true. It does, but it's doing something else there. Flash is filling in shadows and brightening your subject only. That's all the flash does. And flash shouldn't be thought of in the same way as you would think about your just your regular picture or ambient light. See, flash is very, very, very fast. Flash is extraordinarily directional, and flash is very, very bright. So fast, directional, and bright is what flash is. Now when we think about that, that changes the actual picture up a little bit, doesn't it? If we think about the flash being directional and fast, what does that mean? Well, just exactly how fast and how directional. Well, let's look at it this way. Your shutter speed on your camera might go a maximum of 1/4000th of a second, maybe 1/8000th of a second. With flash, a short flash time is 1/20,000th of a second, and a fast flash time could be as high as 1/50,000th of a second. Wow. That's up to 10 to 20 times faster than the actual shutter speed that your camera could go at its fastest. And because it's so fast, it does one thing very good, and that's put out a lot of light in a very quick timing. That means that flash does not affect the ambient light of your scene, only the light that's falling on the subject, which is important. Now, we could get into a lot of that right now, but we're going to say, because of math, I'm going to use the inverse square law, and then we're going to say, aha, okay? But basically, because flash is so bright, and because it's directional, and because you can choose the power of the flash, you can target specific parts of your scene, like your subject in a portrait, such that it receives the majority of the light from the flash and doesn't get reflected back into the actual camera from the background, so you don't have the flash flare. But if your subject is too close at too high of a power, you can completely turn your subject into a blown out white ghost while maintaining a properly exposed background. And that's part of the directional capability of flash, that it can go in a direction. It also is part of the speed capability of flash, and it's part of the brightness capability of flash. That means that when you're using flash, if you have a subject here, for instance, this camera, and this is your background, and you are photographing this way, you can actually target the subject to be hit with the majority of the flash so that the rest of the light just falls off in the background and does not add to the ambient exposure. That's really cool. Knowing that, what situations could we use where that would be important? Let's talk about the most common situation, lighting up a dark room. In this case, flash is going to be used to light up the background of the room, and you might actually use a synchronization for the flash that puts the flash at the back area of the room so that you have a slower shutter to get more of the flashlight in, allowing the flash to go further. Now, when we think about how far flash can go, we have to think about flash in guide numbers, generally referred to in meters. So a guide number of 40 would be roughly 120 feet. 4 times 3 is 12. 40 times 3 is 120. And it's actually a little bit more because a meter's, a little bit more. But the point is that flash is rated in powers of guide numbers at ISO 100. That doesn't matter so much. What matters is the stronger the power, the higher the guide number, such as 60 or 58. Those go much further. And the reason that's important is because flash is rated in values of 1/128th, 1/64th, 1/32nd, 1/16, 1/8, 1/4, 1/2, and 1 whole. And sometimes there are intermediate stops in between. So this understanding lets us know how powerful the flash is going to be, and it allows you to compare the power of the flash at different flashes at different distances. But it sounds complicated, because it is. Flash took me a long time to learn. But going back over here to the cameras, the next thing that's important when thinking about your ambient room situation, your nighttime situation, is which camera would we use? Most of these cameras, and in the game of which one of these things is not like the other that we were playing, actually have focal plane shutters. Right? That's important because a focal plane shutter has a max synchronization speed usually around 1/125th, 150th of a second. Some of the older cameras, 1/60th of a second. The other cameras, like these rangefinders right here, and both of these, all three of these cameras, and this one, have leaf shutters. This Mint TL70 right here can synchronize with flash up to 1/500th of a second, its max shutter speed. That's really cool. That means that you can use flash without getting banding. The banding, you'll know, is where half of the scene is exposed with light that's really bright and the other half is not. It's really dark. That's because your flash power was set very high and your synchronization speed was set wrong. However, if you're using something like the XT1 or the X Pro 1 or this Canon EF or the Minolta X570, your flash synchronization speed is set as a max number, and you can't go any higher than that and have the flash fill the entire frame. So the next thing we need to know is, once we've picked a camera, if we wanted to use flash at all of our shutter speeds, a great camera to use would be a camera with a leaf shutter like this TL70 right here, or this X100S. That would be great cameras to use, because we could then photograph in another situation. That's outdoors in the bright sunlight. You see, flash, remember, isn't all about the background. Flash is all about the subject, and we can gate the flash so that it illuminates your subject properly. Using a leaf shutter is going to allow us to photograph with a much faster shutter speed, so we can photograph at a wider aperture and have more or less depth of field as we need. In this case, a wider aperture would give us less depth of field, which allows us to shoot portraits out on the bright sunny day in the beach. Being able to synchronize a flash with that means that we can take a subject, put their back to the sun so that they are backlit, have the sky illuminated beautifully blue, but still illuminate the face of the subject because we can match the flash speed with the shutter of the camera without any interruptions. These cameras right here won't do it. You have to use another system. Now, there are intelligent systems out there like high-speed sync systems that you could use, but they work by pulsing the flash on the camera many times at a smaller output in order to make the flash fire for the duration of the exposure. And that's important because remember, flash is very fast. And what's happening on a focal plane image or a focal plane shutter is that the flash is on and off before the shutter can completely open, so that some of the image is exposed properly with the flash and the rest of it is not, leading to the dark spot or the dark band. A leaf shutter opens and closes like a diaphragm, like the iris of your lens. It opens and closes. And so it opens from the center outward, and because of that, it opens very, very quickly, and the flash can then illuminate the scene because it's illuminating from the center outwards. Sometimes with flash and leaf shutters, you can see some vignetting that takes place, specifically when you're using a very fast leaf shutter. Most leaf shutters are going to work at 1/1000th of a second, with a couple working at 1/2000th of a second. It just depends on the leaf shutter in your particular camera. So let's wrap this up. Let's walk back over here and talk about this one more time. Hello friends, we're back. And if you enjoyed that little walk, let's kind of review it. There's a couple instances where you're going to use flash, but a flash has three things to note. It's very fast, it's very bright, and it's very directional. A flash also engages light onto your subject, not the entire scene. And the flash does not affect ambient light, which is very important. Now, knowing these things, there's two main situations where you're going to use flash. That's going to be outdoors during the daytime or nighttime in order to make a room brighter. When you're using flash at nighttime, making a room brighter, most of the time your shutter speed isn't going to be a question or a problem because you're going to be using such a slow shutter speed that most cameras will have a synchronization that's around the flash sync speed as well, which is about 1/125th of a second in the first place. What you're going to want to remember is that flash is very directional, so if you point that flash straight towards your subject at a nighttime scene, they're going to get a washed out face. It's much better to bounce the flash off of the ceiling or any neutral colored object that's out there. Could be a wall, something like that. If you don't have the opportunity to bounce the flash, then you can mask the flash's intensity and help get rid of some of that washed out color and look that you see when flash is facing forward using something like a light sphere dome. This is the Cloud Dome by the Gary Fong Light Sphere. I love it. I use it all the time. And on cameras that I don't have the ability to use a bounce or a tilt, I use the light sphere. I just put it right in front of the flash and allow it to gate the light for me and soften it. However, you could use a piece of paper, a piece of vellum, anything that you would like. You could even use a napkin if you so chose in a pinch. As long as it was neutral in color, basically white wouldn't really affect your color too much. Experiment to your own desire. When you're outdoors in the sunlight, the type of camera that you're using is going to be much more important because the shutter the camera has is going to determine whether or not you can use flash at a very fast or very slow sync speed. If you're using most DSLRs, you're going to have a sync speed around 1/180th of a second, 1/125th, something like that, maybe 1/250th on some top-end models. And what you're going to need to know is that that's as fast as you can synchronize your shutter without getting those bandings that go across between properly exposed and dark. We talked about that earlier, but there is a way around it. You could invest in a system such as high-speed sync. And if your system supports high-speed sync, HSS, then the flash will pulse many times but at a much lower output in order to be able to fire the entire time of the shutter opening. However, that's a messy situation because then there's all kinds of different equipment you've got to buy, and it usually ends up costing more in the long run. So unless you need to do that right up front, invest in a system that works right out of the box. One of those is the X100 series by Fuji. Now, you guys know how I feel about this beautiful, capable camera. This right here has the 50 mil conversion on it with a 67 millimeter circular polarizing filter on the front, a 3-stop neutral density filter, and the leaf shutter. I can make the sun black so that you can't see it, and the only thing that is illuminated is the subject in the noon daytime sun on the beach with this camera. That is amazing. People so often overlook this camera because they don't understand the capabilities that it has, and I'm telling you right now, check out my X100F capabilities or any X100 series camera, neutral density, wide aperture, leaf shutter, check. That's a video you can check out that I did. But that's if I'm going to shoot digital. What if I'm going to shoot film, more specifically instant film? How about this beautiful camera right here? This is the TL70 by Mint camera. It's got a leaf shutter and it synchronizes at 1/500th of a second with a flash right on the front built in. How cool is that? Do you see that flash right there? It's right underneath the logo. In fact, you want to know what the cool part about this flash is? They built in an intelligent flash because they know faces get washed out when too close. So the flash augments and diminishes its power output, just like we were talking about before, based on the focal length that you set when you're getting your subject in focus. How cool is that? They really thought that through. Now, If you did want to soften the flash a little bit, you could use, like I said, a dome or something to put in front of the flash in order to help soften it. It would work very well. Guys, today we've been talking about flash. I hope that you've found this helpful. I'm Robert Hamm with Robert Hamm Photography. We've talked about flash, answering your question today. More videos to come. Stay tuned. I want to thank you for watching and remind you that I will catch you on the flip side.